عندي تليفوننا سيلفون أو سايلنت ويتفقد متفاعل خلاي حبيرة زلهم زجاجة ناي متفاعل نحوي على تغييره سلزي بدون يبعثي مالتيو كما جواب نستيله ثم تعلمنا جاه لكم فتي غميله
كيداني كوفي ما برسخة سنتر كأنه
راح كبرتنا عجاش علنا ساعة مدرتة نفسها سلام كميتون كورات دمار كما يوعدكم يغنينا عزيز مركبكم خبركم زغركم بعد حملتهم أبزبوخروا على أوروبا ميلانو إسرائيل 4 إذو على زي فولي زغبرو أبكربا أوان زمنسة كنتي انقصاص يأكل ዓለም-ለኸ እንቅስቃሴ ያክል እናካሂደው ሳልሳይ ጉባኤ በመሆኑ በተሓደ ወገን ኣብ ካልኣይ ጉባኤና ዝወሰናዮ ኣባይታ ወሪድና በኣካል ምዕያይ ዝብል መሰረት ሓደ ዋዕላ ኣብ ሕቡራት መንግስታት ኣሜሪካ ተገይሩ ሕጂ ድማ ኣብ ኤውሮጳ ኣብ ከተማ ሚላን ክቃናዕ ድሮ ብዕሊ ሕጂ ዶክተር ቶማስ ተኪትዎ ዝኸበርኩም ድማ ካልስና ኣብ ርእስቲ ኣብ ሳይበር ነካይዶ በኣካል ወሪድና ከምቲ ዝጀመርናዮ ኣብ ከተማታትን ኣብ ሃገራትን ከምዚ ናይ ሎቢ ተራኺብና ንመያየት እንተነበረ ቅድም ኢሉ ግን ብሰንኪ ኮቪድ ቀፂሉ ድማ ዕረፍቲ ዘይነበሮ ውዕውዕ ሰላማዊ ሰልፊ ሰማያዊ ማዕበል አንጻር ናይ ጽልኢ ዳሳት ህግደፍ ስለ ዝነበረ ከም ዝኾነ ትካላት ድሌት ፍትሒ ኣብ ምፍሻል ስግረ ዶባዊ ፀቕጢ ስርዓት ህግደፍ በኣካል ብሕጊ ብዲፕሎማሲ ተፀሚድና ስለ ዝነበርና ኣወንዚፍናዮ ፀኒሕና ሕጂ ግን ጊዜኡ ኣኺሉ ኣሎ እዚ ዕላማ እዚ ዕላማ ናይ ዝዋዕላ ኩነታት ህዝብና ኣብ ኣዝዩ ዝሓሰበ ደረጃ ጥራይ ዘይኮነ ስርዓት ህግደፍ ኣብ ተሰሊድናዮ ዘለና ከይተረፈ ብወግዒ ብስትራቴጂ ነዲፉ ስግሮ ደባዊ ፀጥ ዘይኮነሲ ቅትለት የካይደልና ኣሎ ዝኽትምና ደቅናውን የካይድ ኣሎ እዚ ኩሉ ስለዚ ንሕና ከም ተቃለስቲ ቁልጡፍ ስትራቴጂን ግብረ መልስን ክህልወና እዚ ዋዕላ እዚ ሓጋዚ ክገብሮ እምነት ኣለኒ ምክንያቱ እዚ ስርዓት እዚ ብጀካ ክንስዕሮ እምበር ካልእ ኣማራፂ ኣብ ዘይብሉ በፂሕና ኣለና እምበር በቶም ነዚ ፕሮግራም ዝመርሑን ዝኣልዩን ዘለዉ ተቃለስቲ እንዳተመራሕና እናይ ናይ ክልተ መዓልቲ ዋዕላ ክኾነልና ይምን ኣብ መወዳእታ እዚ ዋዕላ ኣብ ምድላው ልዑል ፃዕሪ ዝገበሩ ባይቶ ይኣክል ዓዲ ጥልያን ነዚ ኣዝዩ ዓብዪ ዋዕላ ከተስተናግዱ ዝገበርኩሞ ፃዕርን ድኻንን ብፍላይ ከዓ ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ሚላኖን ከባቢያን ከምተን ዋዕሮታት ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ኣብ ኩሉ ዓለም ዘለዋ ንዝገበረኦ باسم ዓለም-ለኸ እንቅስቃሴ ይኣክል ምስጋናና ነቕርብ ብተወሳኺ እውን ኣወሃሃዲትን መራሒትን ዋዕላ ኮሚቴ ሚላኖ 2004 እዛ ብዶክተር ቶማስ ዝምራሕ ኮሚቴ ማለት እዩ ኣዝዩ ፅዑቕን ኣድካምን ስራሕ ስለዝዓመልኩም ብስም ዓለም-ለኸ እንቅስቃሴ ይኣክል ልዑል ምስጋና يتزحفون أجزاء هذو على ذي كون خون فلتهم تمكرهم زوفهم أحواتن أحاتن
أقربتي زعبا زوعلا انتلا يروح كالسنا زهونكم عبودني وتشوف حزبي إترا دوز بلوت أتنياتات بلدي نمسكن أمور داتا ዓለም-ለኸ ምስራት ይኣክል ባይቶታት ሃገራትን ከተማታትን ፈጻሚ ሽማግሌ ባይቶ ይኣክል ብጉልበትኩም ብፍልጠትኩም ብንዋይኩም ኩሉ ግዜ ዝተመስገንኩም ይኹም እሞ ተባረኹ ዋዕላ እዚ ዋዕላ እዚ ዋዕላ ጥራይ ዘይኮነ መዝለሊ ባይታ ክንጥቀመሉ እናተመነኹ سيكون سمعهمني يمسكنكم نبالبات توسخي نظام نظام عايشنا ريكاردو مخلصهم يشتي ونعتاتهم يغنينا في فوتشر So good afternoon and welcome to our 2024 Milan conference. It's an honor to have you all here with us today and tomorrow as we embark on this conference of struggle for justice on the totalitarian regime in our beloved country, Eritrea. We are here to share and discuss expertise for a common goal to shape our country's future. For sure, global Yakin movement believes this conference brings together the brightest thought, passionate persons from all walks of life and around the world. We are very proud to have friends of our struggle among us, support and advise as always as with the people of Eritrea. We thank them so much. Our diverse lineup of speakers and panelists will provide fresh perspective and valuable insights to embrace new possibilities which could excel our struggle to justice. None of this would be possible without the tireless efforts of our organizing committee led by Dr. Thomas and most dedicated Yakin movement of Italian chapter. Lastly, I would like to cherish my special thanks to our beloved sisters, mothers of Milan women, for the wonderful reception and dedication. Really, our struggle wouldn't have through without your commitment. I will wed the podium and floor for our moderator, Dr. Salam, our program leaders for the detailed program, and our panelists and the speakers detailed. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for that introduction, and many congratulations on completing this. I'm going to speak a little bit in Tigrinya and then introduce you to our wonderful panelists. Okay, so we are going to start in a minute, but in a well-respected Eritrean tradition, the organizing committee has asked that we should start by honoring the thousands of Eritreans that have sacrificed their precious lives to this day in the quest for a better and more just Eritrea.
ክቡራት ዕድማት ታዩ ካብ ኣርባዕታት ጀሚሩ
ስጋዕ ትማሊ ስጋብ ሎሚ እዚ ህዝቢ እዚ ህይወት ምኽፋል ኣያቋረፀን ስጋዕ ሰዓት ዜና ንኸፍል ዘለና ስለዚ ነቶም ኩሎም ንዝሃገር ስጋብዛ ሰዓት እዚኣ ዝወደቑ ዝኽረ ሰማዕታት ክንገብረሎም ነቶም ኩሎም ነፍሳት ካብ ቀደም ጀሚሮም ስጋዕ ሰዓት እዚ እንተላይቶም ኣብ ባሕሪ ኣብ ሲናይ እንተላይቶም ብስርዓት ሓኒቖም ስጋዕ ሕጂ ዝሞቱ ዘለዉ ንኩላቶም ዝኽረ ሰማዕታት ንግበር ረፉ ይغنيና
Okay, ቅድሚና ኣጋይሽና ምኻድና ምስላጋ ነቶም ኩልኩም ነዚ ከተዳሉ ብዙሕ መዓልትታት ዝሓዋርሕ ኣበርክቶኩም ግዜኩም ኩሉ ዘለኩም ነገር ዘወፈኹም እንዳመስገንኩም ብፍላይ ከዓኒ ግሎባል ይኣክል ከምኡ ብሎም ብፆት እንዳመስገንኩ ብቐጥታ ናብቲ ምፍላጥ ናይ ኣጋይሽና ክኸይድ እዚ ሴሽን እዚ ብዛዕባ እቲ ንኩላትና ኣጨኒቁና ናሸጊሩና ዘሎ ትራንስናሽናል ሪፕሬሽን ንዕኡ ዝተመልከተ ይኸውን ኣጋይሽና ብእንግሊሾም ክዛረቡ ኮይኑ ግን ኣብቲ ናይ ሕቶን ናይ ልይፅን ግዜ በቲ ኩላትና ክንሰምዖ ንኽእል ቋንቋታት ክጥቀሙ ነንሕትና እናተሓጋገዝና ኣብ ትርጉም ክንከይድ ኢና I'll do it in English and then I'll also offer a summary at the end for everyone. So let's start with our friend Asa. Asa is serves as the International Board of Liberal now. And is a group leader for the district council in a district council in Stockholm. She also manages the International Lifeline Fund, which specializes in supporting civil society under attack in situations like ours, and also political parties that work in repressive countries. This has given her a wide experience of working on the issues of closing democracies, democratic spaces, and repression in civil society, political parties. With her education background in political science, she's also got long experience of working for the party in Sweden and also internationally. So it gives me a great pleasure to be welcoming you here. You have indeed already contributed quite a lot for our movement, and you're very well respected by our colleagues in Sweden, but also all of us. So it's a great pleasure to be welcoming you this afternoon. Thank you so much, Salam. And thank you for inviting me here. It's a great pleasure to be here. As Salam said, my name is Åsa. I'm a Liberal politician, member of the Stockholm City Council. I have 30 years of experience on politics, also on the national and international level. And as you said, I work to support civil society movements in Egypt, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, and some in Eritrea. I joined the Liberal movement in 1991 because I'm a strong believer in democracy, in internationalism, and equal opportunities. The first time I heard about Eritrea was probably 10 years later, in 2001, when David Isaak and a lot of other people were put to prison. The Liberal Party in Sweden was the first movement to draw attention to David Isaak's disappearance. He's a Swedish citizen, but he was nothing was written about it in the newspapers. It was horrible. So we have been fighting ever since on all levels of politics to have him released. But as you know, more than anybody, the Eritrean regime is ruthless, and we have not succeeded. The Liberals are also a small party, so we were not in charge of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Of course, David is only one of many political prisoners, but for me, as for
many other people in Sweden, he is an eye-opener for what is happening in Eritrea overall. And I think it's important to succeed in your advocacy to have something that opens the eyes of people who do not know so much about Eritrea yet. So I also brought with me two books. This is a book that was published in 2004 by the Swedish International Center about advocacy, but also about the transnational repression. And this book came 10 years later, where Kjetil was actually interviewed in this book about a bit. Also that one describes the transnational repression that we are here to talk about today. So Sweden is the stronghold of the Eritrean government. It became happening already in the 60s, where we had people coming to Sweden, and we also had a lot of left-wing academics supporting the liberation movement and starting different solidarity movements together with the diaspora connected to EPLF. At this time, Sweden was a democracy, but we also had one very strong party, so we had some symptoms of a one-party system. So the connection between the Social Democrats and the EPLF became quite strong. And these connections still exist. So Eritrean high-level officials have been visiting Sweden regularly, and the ministers from the Social Democrats, they would be speaking at the festival that started 25 years ago in Stockholm. And it's a festival that's still going on, like in many other countries. So the transnational repression of Eritreans in Sweden, I think it has two main goals. One is to collect money for the regime, and the second one is to establish the PFDJ version of the coup as the main story of Eritrea. And as I see four different methods being used to achieve these goals. Firstly, we have the threats and violence against Eritrean opposition members. That's used to silence all opposition. I know there's many people in the audience who can tell more about what's happening than I am, but it started already in the 70s, and it's still ongoing today. Only last week, I talked to a man who was stabbed with a pair of scissors, when he was at the headquarters, not far away from us. Where, fortunately, he was not seriously injured. But there is also more subtle control and surveillance, which over time makes a heavy psychological pressure. Secondly, the 2% diaspora tax. It was first implemented in Sweden, apparently successful, apparently giving a lot of money going into the regime, and it's still being collected. And I think in the researches I've seen, it seems like 37% of the state GNP of Eritrea comes from this tax. And it's more important now when many Western states do not give any development aid anymore. Thirdly, we have the festivals and other celebrations. They are used to collect money, but also to spread propaganda and to include the new generations of Eritreans. And the fourth method is the Eritrean organizations and churches, which are more and more being taken hostage by the regime. And they are used just for propaganda as well as to collect money. Of course, I guess this is the situation in Sweden, and I think it's similar in other countries, but we can use this opportunity to talk and discuss and learn from each other and see how they are acting in our countries, but also how we can react to stop them. So in the past, I'm ashamed to say that not much has been done in Sweden. They have been able to continue their harassment, their violence, their collection of money without anybody taking notice. Partly it's because Sweden is a segregated country. Some things that are happening in a minority is not noticed even by the majority because we live in different worlds, and that's a big problem in itself. But my feeling is that the Swedish society today is beginning to wake up and trying to stop these activities, but there's still a lot more to do. So the biggest challenge is actually to bring Eritrea on the agenda, because the political agenda is always filled with so many different things. It's gang crimes, it's the climate, it's everything, school results, the many issues pressing. And even if people are interested in transnational repression, more often they talk about Russia, China, Iran, and not so often about Eritrea. So this is the challenge we have, and we need to get this repression on the agenda on local level, on national level, European level, and on the international level. So that's big work to do. For discussion, I would like to share a few examples on what's being done in Sweden. The festival in Stockholm that I mentioned before, it's right very close to where I live. So in 2022, I wrote an article saying it has to stop. And there had been protests, like for the 25 years it has been going on, at least for 20 years there's been protests, but nothing happened. Except for one in 2009, there was an investigation when we had a liberal mayor. And then the cash subventions to the festival was stopped, but they have still been able to continue. After the articles and some public pressure, the civil society organization subletting the localities of Stockholm City to this festival actually stopped it into 2022. Then in 2023, they changed their mind again and continued to stop against all the democracy criteria we have in Stockholm City. This was accepted and supported by the Social Democrats, who are now in power in Sweden. And but we as liberals have continued to pressure the Social Democrats for the whole year now on this issue. It took them 8 months to answer a simple question. They still said, no, we don't see a problem with it. But then after 2 more weeks, they finally changed their mind. And they took away their protective hand from the festival and announced that they will no longer be able to rent public premises. But unfortunately, the story doesn't stop there. There is, in each democracy, I think we have different rules and protections and a lot of administration as well. But in Sweden, we have a very strong support for the freedom of speech. This means that the police says that we cannot use the connection to a non-democratic regime as a reason not to let you use the ground. So they can use the ground this year, but not the premises of Stockholm City. It's a small victory, but not a complete victory. So we have to continue to fight. And to make to explain also what happened, like how strong this protection of free word is that we had several Quran burnings in Sweden. It went to the stage that we had a lot of terror threats. We could not join NATO because of this. Turkey stopped us, but still we could not stop the Quran burnings because it's protection of free speech. But anyway, it's a big step forward that we made the Social Democrats break their long time tie to the festival. And I think this will prove important for the future. On the national level, the current government is introducing new, stronger democracy criteria for grants to churches and civil society organizations. Already this year, the Eritrean National Organization of Sweden lost their money, and that's a good thing because it's controlled by the MTTA. So we need to, this will be entering the force next year. I think this will be very good. Another important move is that the new government is revoking, it makes it easier to revoke asylum for those who have lied their way to Sweden. So, for example, the Eritreans who came to Sweden saying they were persecuted by the regime, but then in the end start persecuting democracy activists in Sweden instead, and just say hallelujah to the regime and going back every year. These are the people who can now lose their citizenship. So, as you see, it's in democracy, it's often one step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps forward sometimes. Decisions take time, and proper implementation of the decision also requires active participation of citizens. But this is the way we need to go. we have to stick to the democratic methods. Last year, when we had the festival, there was big demonstrations, and that's fine, but these demonstrations turned violent, and violence will only make one thing to this movement. It will make us look bad, and in the end, it will make us bad. We need to stick to the democratic methods when we are. And just a few more words to finish about the challenges that remain, because there is still a lot to do politically. I am especially concerned about the fact that Swedish police and the Swedish secret police do not take Eritrea as their priority. They don't have a coordinated strategy when somebody is beaten or threatened. They always see it as an individual crime, not as foreign interference or a system of repression. This has to be changed. So I think we need to enter into a dialogue with the police and the secret police, and we need political help from the government to do it. Also, the 2% tax must be stopped. When we fight the criminal gangs, we always say go for the money. And it's the same for Eritrea. We are fighting a criminal regime here, and we need to go for their money, because the 2% tax actually means that Swedish citizens and other countries are financing a terrorist state and war in the region. This must be stopped, and I think this is an issue that really belongs on the European level, because we have the same problem in so many countries, and there needs to be European and international work. And I think you have a great advantage being an international organization, because you can do a campaign in one country and then copy it in another one, use what works, and make it more professional. Well, that's just a few points from me regarding the situation in Sweden. I hope my fellow Swedes in this room found it correct. If not, please let me know, and of course I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. I am going to do my level best to produce a summary in Tigrinya, having written my notes in English. Right. So, on that, أنا حابة نصحكم كم زبدة أسد إلى هذا الجواز نبركم مناش كن قررت حلبارتها في سويدن في أنت قبل زمان عكاسي في سويدن أبغى حلبارتون نقرأ نحن نعم بتلاقي نسي كتشن هذا الناي دارو سأل ناي كاروتن ما أثرتي تبغي بزح أفضل الدكتوراه كتجمرت سودما قدرت خمسة عينات الرأي سبق في تفلت سبق كم سنة تأخذ كلون نقاسنا حكى خمسة نخال أود كاني نابرديد كم زمسون كم زخيل يا حبيباتنا الذي كان نزو opportunities عند كمرو علينا كونو جن ناي أفيدن للو حيستعمل لك عن social democratic party كذي كاس جميرو بس يكلمت وزند الناس اللي نبرم زند الناتي حجوا كتسأل بمقارنة حد كذي تنري أو نجر نحن يورفلكس كبرتنا كتب حجي نبرم زند الناس بس بو مخنياتهم كا ناي socialist party ناي social democrats وكلتي أب فيستيفال أكيد هذا نبرو كن حجي السودان تغير يمثل كم زلوا نعمل حجي زين كاي زلوا فيستيفال نحطهم تصرفوا خمس سحبوا قاليزات معنا الذي إذا حاجة في عودات يمكن بهاي كان سنة فريق كم زلوا الذي نوح زمانات هذا زدنا كاسي بالتحكم زلوا زي نقريب في interstate repression ما يقدر قبل علينا قبل علينا زلنا تقالسي ويقبل الوسائل زلوا هزب بتقلاته transnational repression ستلا لي من حتى لون حتى زي جنزة ገንዘብ ካብ ክኸውን ከሎ ኣብ ፌስቲቫላት ይኹን ብናይ 2% ታክስ ከምኡ እውን ነቲ ናሬቲቭ ወይ ድማ ነቲ እቲ ታሪክ ሲ በተሳቶም ዝደለዩ ዝፅምፀት ክኸውን ንሕና ነቕርቦ ዘለና ምርትዖታት ተሰማዕነት ንኸይረክብ ንምርካብ በዚ ክልቲኡ መንገዲ እዩ ዝግበር ዘሎ ነዚ ድማ ኣድርና ክንቃለሶ ከም ዘለና እሱ እዩ ዘርኢ ኩላትና መብዛሕትና የጋጥመና እዩ መፅሓፍታት የጋጥመና እዩ ሰልፍታት የጋጥመና እዩ ተነፅሎታት የጋጥመና እዩ ግን ብዙሕ ኣይንዛረበሉ ኢና ብሓደ መንገዱ ሪፖርት ኣይንገብሮን ኢና ከምኡ እውን ከም ቀሊል ነገር ጌርና ኢና ንሪኦ እዚ ሓጋዝ ከም ዘይኮነ ዋና ዝበሃል ነገር ግን ብፍላይ ናይ 2% ታክስ ንክተርፍ ክንፅዕር ኣለና ክንሰርሕ ኣለና እቲ ዝኾነ ክሪሚናል ጋን ዝኾነ ኣብ ከምዚ ዓይነት ነገር ዝተዋፈረ ጋንግ ናይ ማፍያ ዓይነት ኣሰራርሓ ዘለዎ ካብቲ ኩልና ንፈልጦ ናይ ንግደት ኣሰራርሓ ናብ ገንዘቦም ክትከይድ ከለካ ብዙሕ ከተድንዕ ትኽእል ኢኻ ስለዚ ብፍሉጥ ብእውጅ ዝእከብ ዘለዎ ነገር ስለ ዝኾነ ታርጌት ጌርና ብዙሕ ዓወት ክንረክብ ከም ንኽእል የርኢ እዩ ዴሞክራሲ ኩሉ ሻዕ ሓደ ናብ ቅድሚት ኢልካ ናብ ድሕሪት እንዳበልካ ትኸዶ መንገዲ እዩ ብቃልሲ እዩ ዝርከብ ነገር ምክንያቱ እቲ ሓደ ሳይድ እውን ክቃለስ ስለ ዘለዎ ስለዚ ሕጂ እውን እንተኾነ ንቅድሚት ከድና ኣለና ንኣብነት ፌስቲቫላት ሪፍናዮ ኣለና ክንብል ከለና ብካሊእ መንገዲ ከዓኒ ንዕኡ ናታቶም እውን መሰል ኣሎ ናይ ምዝራብ መሰል ኣለዎም ንኣብነት ስለዝበሃል ናብ ድሕሪት ዝተመለስና ክመስል ይኽእል እዩ ግን ፍትሓዊ ቃልሲ ኩሉ ሻዕ ከምኡ እዩ ናብ ቅድሚት እንዳኸደ ይሄዳሉ ንኣብነት ናይ እዚ ዓመት እዚ ፌስቲቫል ዋላ እኳ ነቲ ሜዳ ኣብቲ ደገ ክካረዩ መሰሎም እዩ ተተባሃሎን ቢልዲንጋት ግን ንከይካረዩ ጠጠው ተባሂሎም ተፈኪሮም ኣለዉ ስለዚ እዚ ከማን ሓደ ዓወት እዩ እቶም ከምቲ ዓንተይ ዝበለቶ እቶም ሶሻል ዴሞክራትስ ንሳቶም ከዓ እውጅ ስሒቦም ኣለዉ ካብ ደገፎም ማለት እዩ ነዚ ፌስቲቫላት ስለዚ እዚ ንዓና ዓብይ ዓወት እዩ ክንቅፅሎ ኣለና ቃልሲ እዩ ስለዚ ክቅፅል ኣለዎ ክንዘራረብ ኣለና ከመይ ጌርና ነቲ ነገራት ኩሉ ኣወሃሂድና ከም ንገብሮ ብፍላይ ከዓኒ ከም ግሎባል ይኣክል ዓለም-ለኻዊ ምንቅስቃስ ስለዝኾነ ኣብ ሓደ ዓዲ ሳክሴስ ዝገበረ ነገር ኣብ ካሊእ ዓዲ ንክድገም ሬፕሊኬት ንክግበር ፕሮፌሽናሊ ዝኾነ መልክዑ ሬፕሊኬት ንክግበር ኣገዳሲ እዩ ስለዚ እሱ ሓደ ኣድቫንቴጅ ኣለና ማለት እዩ ምናልባሽ ኣብቲ ድሕሪት ድሓዝ ዘሎ ናይ ሕቶን መልስን ናይ ግዜ ነዚ ከነግፍሖ ንኽእል ኢና and I'm sure we'll be able to use OSA's expertise in getting more ideas on how we can use the fact that we've got our global presence here and lots of networks across the globe. Basically, it's to our advantage, and it is. Thank you, Osa, and I'm sure people will come back to you on some of these, and we'll develop it. And it is in this vein that we take a specific example of Norway, and who better to talk on this than Professor Tromboll himself, the man in flesh. Professor Tromboll is a peace and conflict researcher, and he specializes in Eritrea, Ethiopia, and also Zanzibar. And he's a professor of peace and conflict studies at a university, and also has got a consultancy firm of Oslo Analytica. Am I right? Yeah. He graduated from the University of Oslo, and also he got his PhD in London's Pride, the LSE. That's why he's so great. He studied in London. Professor Tromboll carried out his anthropological studies in Eritrea, amongst other places. So he knows places that I don't know from Adam. So I envy him in that respect, and has been involved in human rights and peace activism, peace activism and research as well for so long. Again, with focus in Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Zanzibar. He was actually not one of the first, he was the first researcher to enter Eritrea in August 1991. And so I'm sure he's got stories to tell from that, maybe for another time, but it would be an interesting story. Today he's going to talk to us about transnational repression, but with focus on what happened in Norway.
For those very kind words. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm so happy to be here together with you. And first of all, apologize. My Tigrinya is really broken. So I don't think you will like to hear that. But as what Akil Gusai, I should have spoken more in Tigrinya. And for those of you who don't have trouble with pronouncing my first name, Seti, my name, the name given to me by Abraham in my village is Teklebraham. So you can, I also go by Teklebraham. So I'm going to talk about, maybe some of you have heard that last month the Norwegian Parliament passed a motion instructing the government to take action to stop transnational repression. So I'm going to talk about how this came about, because I think there are some interesting elements in this process which are lessons to be learned in other countries and communities. But let me take it one step back, because Norway has kind of a peculiar history with Eritrea and with Eritrean struggle. And I'm sure Ambassador Haile, you could fill in deeply on these issues. Because Norway, there are approximately the same numbers of Norwegians in the world that there are Eritreans in the world. We are a very small nation. And as Eritrea, we have had a big brother bullying and dominating us for centuries. She's sitting over there. And we barely escaped war of liberation, but the Swedes didn't dare to fight her, so they accepted our independence. We're a very young nation, and I think that resonance, the Eritrean struggle resonated very much with Norway and Norwegian people's struggle for independence 100 years earlier than you. So we had a very strong solidarity movement in Norway with the Eritrean struggle, and we had a massive support by civil society organizations and government funding to your Eritrean Relief Association, the humanitarian wing of EPM during this run. And when Eritrea achieved its independence in 1991 and 1993, Norway gave very strong political backing to sovereignty and established, due to the help we had given during the war, established very close relationship with the new Eritrean government and with the Isaias Afwerki personnel in the 1990s. Then came the rupture of the 1998-2000 war with Ethiopia, but that was an opportunity, so to say, for Norway to even increase its political dialogue with Eritrea. So we established an embassy in Asmara soon after that war to continue to pursue a political dialogue, not only a peace dialogue as the Foreign Ministry hoped for between Eritrea and Ethiopia, but also a dialogue to reform the stifling political environment in Eritrea after the 2001 crackdown. We had a number of Norwegian political leaders in the Foreign Ministry and also senior diplomats trying to convince Isaias Afwerki to become a social democrat in a way. But the embassy closed in 2013, the Norwegian embassy, at more or less the same time as when the influx of Eritrean refugees to Norway increased massively. And that changed the dynamic in the Norwegian political discourse on how we should understand and relate to Eritrea. Particularly the peak of refugees, not only in Norway, but in Europe, was 2015, 2017. 40% of the asylum seekers arriving in Norway were Eritreans. and that was, you know, in the chaos in the Middle East and Asia. Today, there are about 25,000 Eritreans in Norway and 8,200 Norwegians born by Eritrean parents. So it is a kind of substantial group of diaspora in Norway. The influx of refugees was then turning to be the main focus for the conservative right government we had during this time in 2015. So we had a Minister of Justice who were from the right-wing party, who were adamant to stop the influx of refugees. And he also started to negotiate a return agreement of refugees back to Eritrea at that time. In order to effectuate his policies, he commissioned a study on why Eritreans were fleeing the country, reason for flight, because he assumed that they were labor migrants instead of rightful asylum seekers, as he phrased it. By chance, I was the person conducting that study for the ministry, and he didn't get the conclusion he wanted, so to say. So it kind of fizzled out, that strategy the right-wing party had adopted to try to reclassify Eritrean refugees as labor migrants. The conservative right government continued, but the Minister of Justice was abandoning the Eritrea docket, so to say. And this is important, I believe, because instead of focusing on the influx of refugees, it was reframed to more an issue of integration and how to develop a successful integration strategy. Other ministries in the Norwegian government took over the charge, and explicitly, and I'm reading from their white paper, needed to increase knowledge about what can limit immigrants' opportunities to participate in Norwegian society and to enjoy the right to free life on par with other residents in Norway. That was the explicit kind of task of the Ministry of Education, who headed that because they had a docket of children, and it was focusing on the integration of children. So the Ministry of Education commissioned a report which was called then Pressure and Control, which in the Norwegian domain for the first time identified then transnational repression of selected immigrant groups in Norway as a challenge then to integration. And specifically, that report covers the Eritrean diaspora, but also the Ethiopian, the Chechen, Turkish, and Uguri communities. But the Eritreans were singled out as more prone to transnational repression in the report. An important conclusion in that report, which was an eye-opener for the Norwegian political or bureaucratic elite, was the fact that the report concluded that the pressure and control by foreign states contributed indirectly to weaken the informants' trust in Norwegian social institutions, particularly the justice sector. So it became that kind of foreign policy element became integral to domestic policy. And that is an important inflection point in how politicians think about the issue of transnational suppression. Immediately thereafter, this first report, or not immediately, a couple of years later, we had a new change of government in Norway, which then became a Labour socialist left government. They commissioned a new report to elaborate on the pressure and control report, which then explicitly was called then transnational repression, which identified social, political, and legal implications of transnational repression. How these are in violation both with Norwegian law and international law. And it classified 7 different actions and experiences committed by foreign regimes and their collaborators as transnational repression. And that kind of classification is also an interesting point because it made the kind of vague concept of transnational repression more concrete and more manifested and more understandable for political actors in Norway. Because, first was violence and other attacks on the physical safety of persons, threats, harassment and discrediting individuals, infiltration, restriction of conditional consular services, surveillance, and weakening and abuse of international framework assets. Again, the conclusion of that report is important to understand how the politicians later reacted, because the report concludes, and I quote, transnational repression prevents integration and participation in democratic processes for many diaspora groups. Transnational repression has the potential to pose a significant social problem in the form of threats to Norwegian sovereignty, national security, territorial integrity, and democracy. In addition to human rights violations and abuses, it represents for individuals and diaspora groups. Again, the focus on domestic policy concerns, and particularly security concerns, what this represents for Norway. Something new, which again brings another group of politicians into this debate, not only the soft leftist integration politicians, but also the hardcore realpolitik politicians became aware of the issue. No offense to any socialist leftist politicians in the audience. You're doing a good job too. Then I need to introduce another element, which is important. And that's, of course, the Blue Revolution also reached Norway last year, or the year before even. But augmenting the reports on transnational repression was the unprecedented street clashes occurring in Bergen, the western city of Norway, during the 1st of September celebration last year, where pro-democracy supporters confronted the regime-friendly organizers. The violent street fights shocked the citizens of Bergen and Norway, shocked the police and the political elite in the country. And our prime minister came on national television and stated that the violence creates insecurity for people in Bergen. It is also importing a conflict from another part of the world and into Norwegian city streets with violence between groups and against the police. It is totally unacceptable, as viewed from the prime minister and official side. We had fighting earlier in Oslo in spring last year, the year before, but not at the level we saw in Bergen, which didn't reach the level we saw in Stockholm, but still it was shocking as it occurred in a rather peaceful part of Norway. I'm not endorsing the violence, but I say it was the strategy which was an eye-opener for politicians across Europe. Suddenly, that became interesting. So, the international context influenced Norwegian decision makers. The confrontation between the pro-democracy groups and the regime supporters across Europe last year was noted with concern among political actors in Norway. And an added element to this, which also makes it even more seriously, because at the same time, Russia's war on Ukraine and Russian influence, espionage, and the Russian diaspora in Europe put transnational repression firmer on the political agenda. These are not only diasporas from faraway countries, which really doesn't concern us. These are diasporas from our enemy neighbor, as Europe looks upon Russia now. But I need to add even another element which is crucial to pack into why the Norwegian Parliament reached that position. And that is, over several years, key Norwegian Eritreans have lobbied Norwegian political parties to draw attention to the situation in Eritrea, but also to the situation of transnational repression in Norway. And finally, an opposition party, sister party, the Liberal Left in Norway, took the initiative then last year, after what happened in Bergen, the street violence, to raise this concern directly in the Norwegian Parliament and prepared to present a private motion. So now we are entering then the parliamentary process, which concluded last month. So in the end of 2023, then the Liberal Left Party submitted this private motion to the Norwegian Parliament, requiring that the government should prepare an action plan, explicitly an action plan against transnational repression of Eritrea
specifically. This motion was, as its normal procedure in Norway, it was both heard in the parliamentary committee, but also put out for public hearing, so all citizens of Norway could present its comments and interest into that motion. And actually the parliament received an unprecedented number of private individual responses, over 600 Eritreans, more or less all of them, but with a couple of ethnic Norwegians, were submitting their hearing responses to the parliament, providing personal experiences of repression and also endorsing then an action plan to curb it. And this convinced all parties in the parliament expressed a concern with the prevalence and the negative impact of transnational repression in Norway. However, politics is politics wherever you are, also in democracies, and the government, any government, will not be pushed to do something by an opposition party without kind of putting up some kind of resistance. So the left government coalition and the Conservative Party in opposition presented alternative suggestions than the private motion presented by the Liberal Left. And the basic thing can be drawn down to that the government was hesitant to promise a specific action plan against transnational repression. And furthermore, they found it counterproductive to identify the Eritrean diaspora as the only victims in Norway of transnational repression. And it was a debate back and forth in Parliament and several votings on different formulations, but the final formulation approved by the Parliament reads like this, that the government should take measures to prevent transnational repression of persons in Norway, for example, through an action plan against transnational repression. So what it really means in concrete action from the government is yet too early to say, but it has been put firmly on the agenda, and they would need to follow up with some actions. So let me conclude by drawing some lessons from the Norwegian process. We see that the Norwegian political elite finally reacted to and took action of transnational repression of Eritreans in Norway due to then 4 interconnected factors. First of all, it turned away from concentrating on stopping immigration to focus on successful integration. Secondly, this spurred the interest to commission studies which uncover and identify the presence of mechanisms of transnational repression in Norway. We needed to know more what is an obstacle to successful integration. And thirdly, the violent confrontations brought about by the Blue Revolution highlighted the dire situation and urgency to act now on the matter in order to try to stem those confrontations. And fourthly, not least, consistent and constructive lobbying of political parties by pro-democracy Eritreans in Norway. All these 4 factors kind of come together and then provided the stepping stone for the parliament decision to instruct the government. Let me just end then that this is not over. Transnational repression is not over in Norway by this parliamentary decision. And 2 issues remain key and remain as an obstacle to stopping transnational repression. First, a homegrown, a domestic concern is that the study into transnational repression identified that within Norway and the Norwegian governmental system, the responsibilities to stop transnational repression is divided among 6 different line ministries, from Minister of Justice to Minister of Interior to Minister of Immigration to Minister of Justice, Foreign Affairs, and so on. And to get 6 line ministries with different, in Norway we usually have coalition governments, so we have different parties running different ministries, to come together to form a coherent, robust strategy to tackle this is very, very challenging, extremely challenging. And that's why also the government were kind of hesitating to promise an action plan. They have promised action, but politicians promise actions every day in Norway and Sweden and everywhere else without following up. So I'm still hesitant to be too optimistic that things will happen in Norway. But more concerning, obviously, is that no matter what we do in Norway, Sweden, Europe, whatever, as long as the regime is in Asmara is in power, they will continue to exhibit repression of Eritreans at home and abroad, no matter what we do in Europe. So those 2 obstacles still remains. Doesn't necessarily say we should give up. We should continue to work on this. And I think, again, the processes in Norway is something to learn by other countries in this regard. Thanks a lot.
Right. So my challenge is to summarize that and integrate. Talk about tall tasks. Okay. كم تعنتوا يزبلكم ناي شاتل زغربرنا أب سويدن زخونة أب نرويج زخونة نجاريو قدمينا ياو سون بدحر بايته وبمنجار دحر بايتا ناي نرويج ناي إيرتران ركب بمنجاريو جميرو السودما نرويج إيرتران بزح زمساسل النجار لونا حزب بزح تمساسل يو كم أون عبيتن ጸሎትን ጎረባብቲ ስለዘለዎ ኣብናታቶም ስዊድን ኣብናሕናኻ ኢትዮጵያ ምዃኑ እዩ ምህላዎም እዚ ክልቲኡ ብዙሕ ተመሳሳልነት ስለዘለዎ ተሪርን ነዊሕ ግዜ ዝኸደን ርክብ ነይሩ ኣላያንስ ነይሩ ማለት እዩ ብፍላይ ከዓ ኖርዌይ ከምቲ መብዛሕትና ንፈልጦ ንኤርትራን ሪሊፍ ኣሶሲዬሽን ብዙሕ ደገፍ ይህቡ ነይሮም ቅድሚ ናጽነት እንተኾነ ብዙሕ ተራ ዝነበሮም ሰባት ስለዝኾኑ ብድሕሪ ናጽነት እዚ ርክብ ቀፂሉ ናብ ፖለቲካዊ ደገፉን ዓብዩ ብፍላይ ከዓኒ ነቲ ኩነታት ናብ ዴሞክራቲክ ንዝኾነ መንገዲ ንምፅላው ብፍላይ ከዓ ንኢሳያስ ኣፈወርቂ ዴሞክራቲክ ዝኾነ መንገድታት ንኸትሕዙ ብዙሕ ፃዕሪ ከም ዝገበሩ እዩ ዝገልጽ እዚ ኩነታት እዚ ብዙሕ ኣይተዓወተን ከምቲ ኩላህና ንፈልጦ ግን ዋላ ድሕሪቲ ናይ 2000 ውግእውን እንተኾነ እሱውን ከም ኦፖርቹኒቲስ ከም ዕድል እዩ ተራእዩ ነቲ ርክብ ንምድልዳልን ናይ ሰላም ጥራሕ ከይኮንስ ናይ ዴሞክራሲ መንገዲ ሓቢርካ ንምግባሩን ብዙሕ ፈተነታት ከም ዝተገብረ ኣብ 2000 ክሳዕ 2003 ኤምባሲ ኣብ ኖርዌይ ከም ዝነበረ ሽዑ ግን ካብ 2003 ምስቲ እንዳገደደ ዝኸይድ ዝነበረ ኩነታት እቲ ኤምባሲ ከም ዝተዓጽወ እዚ ኩነታት እዚ ከዓኒ ምስቲ ብዙሓት ኤርትራውያን ናብ ኖርዌይ ከኣቱ ምጅማሮም ኣብ ሓደ ተመሳሳላይ እዋናት ምዃኑ ብዙሕ attention ክስሕብ ክኢሉ ማለት እዩ ኣብ ኖርዌይ በዚ ሕጂ ግዜ 25,000 ኣቢሎም ኤርትራውያን ከምኡውን 8,200 ኣቢሎም ዝኾኑ ከዓ ኣብ ኖርዌይ ናብ ኤርትራውያን ዝተወለዱ ቆልዑት ከም ዘለዉ ስለዚ እቲ ቁፅሪ ኣዝዩ ምስቲ ዋሕዲ ናይቲ ተወለድቲ ናይ ኖርዌይ ብዙሕ እዩ እቲ ቁፅሪ ስለዚ ምስ ግዜ ሞኻ ምስቲ ብዝሒ እቲ ቁፅሪ እቲ ፎከስ ካብ ከመይ ጌርና ጠጠው ነብሎም ነዞም ስደተኛታት ካብ ናብ ዓድና ካብ ምእታው ካብ ዝብል ፎከስ ናብ ከመይ ጌርና ኢና ተዋሃሂዶም ዓዶም ኮይኑ ኣፍሬቲ ኣካላት ኮይኑ ኢንተግሬትድ ኮይኖም ክነብሩ ከም ዘለዎም ናብኡ ንዕኡ ናብ ምጥማት ነዚ ዝኸውን ነገራት ናብ ምስራሕ ኣብ ዘድሃብሉ ግዜ ኣብቲ ዝተገብረ መጽናዕትታት ሓደ ካብቲ ዝረኸብዎ ነገር እንተልዩ እዚ ትራንስናሽናል ሪፕሬሽን ወይ ድማ ካብ ኤርትራ ኣቢሉ ዝመፅእ ፀቕጢ ኣብ ልዕሊ ስደተኛታት ንኢንቴግሬሽን ናይ ኤርትራውያን ጥራሕ ከይኮነ ናይ ካልኦት እውን እንተኾነ ንኢንቴግሬሽን በዳሂ ከም ዝኾነ ኢንቴግሬሽን ወይ ከዓ ስደተኛታት ኣብቲ ዝኣተውሉ ዓዲ ተዋሂዶም ንኸይነብሩ ሓደ ካብቲ ኣፀጋሚ ዝኾነ ነገር ካብቲ ተሰዲዶምሉ ዝመፁ ዓዲ ዘጋጥሞም ተፃብኦታት ከም ዝኾነ ስለ ዝተፈልጠ ምስኡ ተተሓሒዙ ኣቃልቦ ክውሰደሉ ተገይሩ ብዙሕ መፅናዕትታትን ብዙሕ ክትዓትን ምስ ተገበረ ንትራንስናሽናል ሪፕሬሽን ከም ሓደ ነቶም ስደተኛታት ጥራሕ ከይኮነስ ነቲ ሃገር እውን ዝፀልውን ዘፀግምን ነገር እንዳኾነ ይመፅእ ከም ዘሎ ኣብኡ እዩ መደምደምታ በፂሑ ዘሎ ምስኡ ድማ እቲ ብፍላይ ንኤርትራውያን ዝምልከት እቲ ዓመን ቅድሚ ዓመን በዚ ናህና ብሉ ሪቮሉሽን ዝተገብረ ቃልስታት ኣብኡ ከዓኒ እቲ ኤርጀንሲ ናይቲ ነገር ከመይ ግዜ ዘይህብ ኩነታት በፂሕና ከም ዘለና እውን ዘርኢ እዩ ነይሩ ስለዚ ዋላ እኳ እቲ ቫለንስ ንድግፎ ነገር እንተዘይኮነ ወይ ከዓ ንጠልቦን ንደልዮን ነገር እንተዘይኮነ ሓደ ካብቲ ዘርኣዮ ነገር እንተልዩ ግን እቲ ሪፕሬሽን ክሳዕ ክንዲ ምንታይ ኣፀጋሚ ኩነታት ይበፅሕ ከም ዘሎ ከምኡ ናብ ኤርትራውያን ጥራሕ ከይኮነስ ንኣብነት ምስ ናይ ራሽያን ዩክሬንን ውግእ ተተሓሒዙ ናይ ራሻ ከምኡ ዓይነት በዳሂ ዝኾነ ተፃብኦታት ኣብ ልዕሊ እቲ ዳያስፖራ እሱ እውን ምስኡ እውን ተተሓሒዙ ዝመፀ ናብቲ ኣጀንዳ ኣምፂዎ ኣሎ እንተኾነ ግን ሕጂ እውን ተወዲኡ ማለት ኣይኮነን ኣብ ፓርላማ ነቲ መንግስቲ ሓደ ኣክሽን ንክወስድ ብፍላይ ከዓ ኣክሽን ፕላን ዲቨሎፕ ንክገብር ፃዊዒት እኳ እንተሎ እቲ ጉዳይ ናብ 6 ኣቢለን ሚኒስትሪታት ስለ ዝወደቐ ነዚ ከዓ ምውህሃዱ ከቢድ ስለ ዝኸውን ዘሎ እቲ ቃልሲ እውን እቲ ፕሬሸር እውን እቲ ክንገብሮ ዘለና ነገር እውን ቀፃሊ እዩ ምስኡ ከዓ ተተሓሒዙ ዘሎ ነገር ከዓኒ ዋላ እኳ ንትራንስናሽናል ሪፕሬሽን ይኹን ነቲ ካሊእ ጉዳያት ኣብዚ ጠጠው ከነብሎ ተኸኣልና ኣብ ኤርትራ ይኹን ኣብ ካሊእ ዓድታት ብፍላይ ግን ንዓና እቲ ናይ ኤርትራ እንዲሁ ብዙሕ ዘገድሰና ኣብ ኤርትራ ዘሎ ዲክቴተር ዘሎ ወይ ከዓ እቲ ዓማፂ ዝኾነ ስርዓት ኣብ ኤርትራ ክሳዕ ዘሎ እቲ ዓመፅ ምቕፃሉ ስለ ዘይተርፍ ኣድህቦና ኣብዚ ጥራሕ ከይኮነስ ነቲ ኣብኡ ዘሎ ስርዓት እውን ምቅላስ ክኸውን ከም ዘለዎ እዩ ፕሮፌሰር ትሮምቦል ነጊሩና ያ I apologize for that translation. Okay, thank you very much. So we will go on to, why am I talking to you in English? So now حتوتاتنا هنكيدينا هم تعنتو يزبلكم حتون تليكم ويكاني كقفح تدليو نجر نتليو إدكم نداوتساكم ما يكالو دي خمينا هنقبره. اوكي روبينج مايك ندحر لكم مجمريا شمكم دحر حتو حد صراب ندابلكم مايك 5 الكاي
هذا لا هلا yeah Okay, good.
Can you understand?
Yeah, sure.
ብዙሕ ሰብ ይከታተለና ስለ ዘሎ ኦንላይን ኣበይ ይኹን ልካ
Okay, all right. Den första frågan är till Åsa, but I will want you also to answer it, but I will say it in English. Although I believe you understand even maybe
English,
Swedish.
please.
Okay, but
I don't think the rest of the
for him,
Swedish.
but she should, Dr. Salam should translate it to
From Swedish. Sorry, I'm very talented, but not that talented.
No. I mean in English. I will say it so that you can translate it to Tigrinya. Ja, min fråga är yttrandefrihet. Kan man göra en reklam till en diktator? Alltså inkludera detta, alltså att ha yttrandefrihet kan inkludera att göra reklam för diktator. Och okay. My question was in English. If you are doing what do you call it? Advertisement to en diktator på grund av what was the word? Yttrandefrihet.
Freedom of speech.
Yeah, freedom of speech. Does it include to make a reclam for a dictator? That is my question. And I hope both of you can answer it.
ታሕቶ ሕፅራ ቢልካ ብናፅነት ናይ ነብስኻ ምግላፅ ወይ ድማ ፍሪደም ኦፍ ስፒች ሃምሲልካስ ንዲክቴተር ኣድቨርታይዝ ምግባር ግቡእ ድዩ ቅኑዕ ድዩ ዝብል ሕቶ እዩ ንክልቲኦም ምሽ ኦሳ do you want to say?
If there is something that they cannot do regular, then we can use it.
Yeah. Good.
That's what I'm thinking about.
Sure.
Yes, the freedom of speech includes to say the worst things you can say. It includes also the right to propagate for a dictatorship. That's
Let me just add a bit, because I think this is important, and I have both in Sweden and Norway, because Swedish media often calls me when there are trouble in Sweden on with Eritreans, and I have defended the pro-regime organizers to organize, the right to organize festivals, the right to say what they say, the right to also display the symbols of the regime and put up theater shows and what's not, to celebrate the ideology of the regime. That is their right, and that should be protected. And I think this is the same in Sweden as is in Norway. In European countries, there are limitations to freedom of speech. You have hate speech clauses and other clauses which limit it, but the pro-regime activists are not close to those limits yet. As long as it is not a special law prescribing the Isaias regime as something more than it is today, so to say. So the reality is that we need to protect the regime supporters' right to hold these festivals. But at the same time, it is also your right to demonstrate and protest against the festivals. And the police are caught in the middle of this to their frustration.
But yeah, go on. But also, it is not the right to use public money to do this kind of demonstration, and it's not the right to have the public premises to have it on. So that's why we are able to stop them from having it on the Stockholm.
Right. Thank you very much. There are a couple of hands at the back, and then I'll come to you, Dr. Jafana, but there's two on this side.
Dr. Jafana or
No, but this side is low.
Now, Nabzi. No, the video.
First of all, thank you very much, speakers. And I have to say, what you've done in Norway, in Sweden, you have a voice to say it. But when we comes to the Westerns, it's very difficult, especially when we look at Russia, what is they doing in Ukraine. Operations, it comes also of face, and obviously Eritrea is no different. He legitimized it by saying, you are doing that, I'm not doing this. So what's the difference? for you to have this voice, we're extremely proud of you, especially Professor. Britain, they need to borrow your brain. It is very difficult what they're doing, especially for those young people. They pass through so much difficulty and come into the country, and now they criminalize them. And we have extremely big problem to penetrate through to Britain's government. What you've done in Norway is we have no word to say, because except saying thank you right now. Tomorrow we're gonna remember it. We're gonna teach our children at university, because this is the biggest problem we have in the entire world. Britain does it, America does it in Iraq. Today, Russia, what it's doing in Ukraine. It is to see it, to witness it in 21st century, people dying and nobody say anything. The international bodies not even have a voice. It is not good. The other things which I want to ask you, and obviously, how we can protect these young people, the brutal revolutions right now in Britain. The intelligence group are having intelligence from the brutal government, which is from the embassy. The embassy is going there and tell them what need to be done on these brutal revolutions. Those young people, what they are doing is, please, we left the country. You told us to leave the country. You make us, we cannot live in the country, and you're coming and oppress us here. And the British government and the intelligence groups, they don't want to know it. And obviously, I want to ask you, I want to borrow your brain. When you look at the Red Sea situations, do we have any chance, the Western, to listen to us? Because they need this man. And obviously, I want you to comment on that. This can be adapted by the politicians. When you have that, and the government is doing what you want to do, and obviously oppress us, do we have any hope, to adapt it and to do something? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny. Maybe I'd like to add my question to perhaps that question, which is about the kind of repression that our young people are facing is very different from what the from what the Russian diaspora would feel like, with people who know their rights, people who have read, people who understand what should and shouldn't be happening to them. Our young people have lived with this throughout their lives, and they do not understand what should and shouldn't be happening. And therefore, the subtlety of it, the psychological nature of the repression, the unwritten nature of the repression, and also the language issues, like this. The Eritrean regime is not going to say anything they're not going to say anything in Swedish or Norwegian or English. It's all going to happen in Tigrinya. It's all going to happen in Arabic and languages that are and the secret codes that we as nationals understand. And so I think more needs to be done. It needs to be understood, and it needs to be understood in the context of the pervasive nature of the regime. And I guess that's something that can be taken. But what can we learn as a movement? What should we continue to do? What should we perhaps not do as much? Go on.
Yeah.
Both questions.
I think now, of course, I don't know the entire work of the Eritrean diaspora, so I judge from what I see in Sweden. I think that you need to work out a proper advocacy strategy. One key point that Kjetil mentioned is to make your issues, connect them to an important domestic issue, something that's already hot on the political agenda. That will improve your chances to make something happen, and make it happen quickly, not the slowest democratic way. So I use this word PIN, first for the P, you need to be professional, you need to be political. You need to understand the politics of each country to know which question can we tag onto it. How can we continue? What decisions need to be made? Who makes them? When? And you also need to understand the communication skills and the advocacy to first make people interested and then tell them the story bit by bit and kind of do it professionally. Maybe you need to even add money to have an advocacy firm help you out or something. I think one of your strengths is that you are international, so you can try different strategies in different countries. You can learn from each other. I think also what Kjetil mentioned, this to have hard evidence, to have studies made. That's very strong. That's ammunition in a democracy, to have the good arguments, to have the strong facts. So you need to work not only professional, international, but also network-based. Tie on to scholars, to media, to politicians, to other civil society organizations, so that you are not the only voice lifting this issue. You need to be more people helping you out and spreading your message. Also, I think it's sometimes easy to be overwhelmed because you have so many things you want to do. First of all, we need to get rid of the dictatorship, because when that's gone, a lot of the problems will be gone too. But also you need to change things in the country where you're living now. So make a strategy with small steps, cupcakes, and maybe different groups working on different issues. Because once you start building this big wedding cake, it's like you fail because it will slip down because you took too much on your plate, kind of. But if each group works on a little bit and you have smart goals for each of the cakes, you can put them all together, and then in the end you will succeed. So yeah, that's just a few things. But also maybe also the overall goal, it is a democratic Eritrea. So when you make your actions against the transnational repression, it's important that the steps you take, that they contribute both to making the situation better in the country where you're living now and to weaken the government. So that's why I suggested go for the money.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I agree with what Åsa is saying. I think for the first question, sir, I didn't get your name, my Swedish friend. How to protect the young blue revolutionary activists in UK and elsewhere. I think because we've seen over the last year and a half that the optics have changed. The first demonstrations, the first smaller clashes, the sympathy were on the activists, the blue revolution side. But that changed somehow early last year. And it has changed in Sweden, certainly in Netherlands. I don't know if anyone saw the documentary which the Netherlands public broadcaster made earlier this, a couple of months ago, which were rather negative framed, although I tried to balance it somehow. I also think that some key people in Brigade Nehamdu have learned to refine their strategies also when it comes to how to confront the regime supporters in order not to come forward as so violent, to use that term. Although violence is also needed to draw both attention to your concerns, but also to stop the government. I'm again not condoning violence, but I can see from a real political perspective that is an instrument. I think that you have to shift somehow in UK or elsewhere the focus back to the regime and the fact that it is the regime who is a threat to UK security. It is the regime and it's their collaborators who are a direct security threat to Britain And certainly it's easier to link it at the global scale when you see that Eritrea is Russia's closest ally on the African continent. And they are in cohort together on certain global common concerns. So you have to be more adamant to say that the threat are not from the individual refugees who have gone through such dire straits to arrive in UK and have more trauma than any other population group in the world. Salam, you can attest to that, certainly. But I think, yeah, so I am a bit concerned that the optic has changed, because you need the sympathy of the general public in Europe to push your case, and it's starting to slip somehow. And that you should be worried about, so it is not lost, because then you have not only 2 steps back, you are 10 steps back in your struggle. So be careful in how you navigate in the next, the upcoming festivals later this month, for instance, in several European countries. And then the second issue is what you raised, and I think also you did point that. I think it is important exactly that you are not looked upon, and sorry, I'm blunt, I'm not a diplomat, ambassador, you have to excuse me. You are not looked upon as credible, unbiased, objective witnesses. You are looked upon as very biased, very positioned when you talk about your grievances. Can we really trust you? Because you are all politicians against, you are all, the same. So you need a third party or several third parties to provide the evidence for your grievances, for your concern, for the abuse, for the repression, and how that is influencing and affecting the security and domestic politics of European countries. The best would obviously be, as Norway did, we have a rather open government in Norway. That's a blessing in our country. That it was the government ministries who commissioned all these 3 reports I mentioned, which makes it credible in the eyes of the government. And that helps a lot. They cannot kind of reject it totally. They can say that it is an external commission report. We don't fully agree with the conclusions. Fair enough. They often do that. But it's their reports. They commissioned it. They own it. Which makes the information much more valid in a political discourse. If you don't get the ministry to do it in UK or elsewhere, well, get an independent think tank, a university, a research group, which are not Eritrean based, something else to do it, and then float it to the government. Say that, look here, this is credible information. It's not ours. We haven't produced it. This is produced by an eminent university or a research policy institute, and then use that as a stepping stone to further push your agenda. But as you know, all politics are domestic politics. Bring it back home. Why does it hurt UK? Why does it hurt Netherlands, Finland, Sweden, and so on?
Yeah.
We don't care about Eritrea, to be frank. The politicians in Europe doesn't care about Eritrea. It has been a dictatorship for 33 years. Who cares? We could have stopped it several times. We don't. We care about ourselves. Sorry. That's how it is.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I guess እቲ ደጋጊሙ ዝመጽእ ዘሎ ነገር ኣብቲ ቃልስና ኢንቨስት ክንገብሮ ዘለና ነገር ኣሎ። እሱ ከዓ ኩልሻዕ ሓይሊ ጥራሕ ኣይኮነን፣ ካሊእ ነገራቱን ኣብ ዲፕሎማሲ ኦፍ ኮርስ ግን ምስኡ ድማ ተተሓሒዙ ኦሳውን እንታይ ትብል ነራ ምናልባት ኣድቮካሲ ፈርምስ የድልዩና ኾኑ ወይ ሪሰርች ፈርምስ የድልዩና ኾኑ ነቲ ንሕና ንሓልፎ ዘለና ኢንዲፐንደንት ብዝኾነ ድምፂ ከቃልሑልና ዝኽእሉ ካብቲ ኣጀንዳ ነቕ ከም ዘይብል ክገብሩልና ዝኽእሉ። ስለዚ እቲ ንገብሮ ነገርሲ ሓደ ሸነኽ ጥራሕ ዘለዎ ነገር ክኸውን የብሉን፣ ብዙሕ ሸነኽ ዘለዎ ኦፍኮርስ ብዓቢኡ ነቲ ዲክቴተርሽፕ ምቅላስ ኣሎ። ኣብዚ ዘለናዮ ቦታታት ከዓ ነቲ ዘጋጥመና ዘሎ ፀገም ኣብቲ ኣጀንዳ ንኽኣቱ ምግባር ኣሎ። ግን ምስኡ ከዓ እቲ ከምቲ ክንገብሮ ዝቐነና ከዓ ኣብቲ ኣጀንዳ ንኽኣቱ ከዓ ንገብሮ ነገራት ኣሎ። ስለዚ እቲ ሓደ ነቲ ሓደ ተመላሊኡ ክኸይድ ኣለዎ ሓደ ብዘይ ሓደ ከምቲ ብዙሕ ግዜ ንብሎ ፕላን ኤ ሎ ፕላን ቢ እንዳበልና ክስታይ ንብሎ ሓደ ነቲ ሓደ እንድሕር ዘንእሶ ኮይኑ ኩላህና ኢና ንድሕሪት ንምለስ ግን እቲ ሓደ ነቲ ሓደ መሊኡ ክኸይድ ኣለዎ ካብኡ ከዓ እንዳተምሃርና ከዓ ነቲ ዘየድሊ ከዓ ክንገድፎ ኣለና ናብ ድሕሪት ስኡ እቲ ተደጋጊሙ ዝመፅእ ዘሎ መልእኽቲ ክልተ ዶክተር ፀፈና ነይሩ እዚ
Let me just, since we are on recording, so I suddenly became a bit nervous by being very blunt. So please don't misunderstand me. I deeply care of Eritrea, and many of us deeply care of Eritrea. I'm talking about institutions, yeah? So,
okay.
Don't cut that out and say, shit, you don't care about it. He said it.
He cares very much. It's in his blood. His what was it? Takhla Burhan who would care more? Anyway, there was another question from that end, and it's over to Dr. Jafana. One question on that end. حادبتي اتي قبع جرد yeah and then Dr. Jafana
and then doctor and then Carlota out allo and then Kaluna allo
ساعة كندي oh okay there's 30 minutes so don't worry
yeah توتاتنا حصر بيلنا نقول له كبات امنتي
سمع له استوهابنا عدل يمسكن عبايتن سي زبال كاب دنمارك يا مزي ماج اول بايتو ياكل دنمارك كمون اول بايتو برجنا حمد مالك ناتي حتو نزيوم كوراتا غايشنا ابشو ودن نعرت قبلت 25 كساب 28 جولاي فستيفال كم زلو يقاوحوا له بشنرخ سرعات مالتي كم استخل كلينا نفل هنا خا كم سكان نجال مالتي تي ناتنا نجر تتحازس لزخون كلنا اجي بخميو تتحيز له كم زنا يزحلف عامد كي قاتم كي انتي تتحاز نجر الله نحنا مقبارم زي مقبارم ناتنا قداي يكون نجن كان من مقبارم من دحر مقبارم من زلو أوانا زمت وي بزعوانا سرح بروباغاندا زحتنا مالتي كاليتي ني بروفيسور اتي اب نروي زتبصحي ناي ترانسناشنال ريبريشن نحنا كم تقماطو دنمارك نالباس كان نبياون سلا زخون اب خمينا هتقمون نخل اب دنمارك بزح جي سلن صقم مس اب بارلمنت يكون مس ناي منغست اكارات كنراقب مالتهم منسيات او زلنا سالسيتي نخلوتكم حتو اب دنمارك كم تناتكم نتفتا زنطفو مسخم متأثر زلوهم سبات اللودو كتراخبنا خطفولو بخمي كان احنا تي اب نروين اب شودن استسرحي اب دنمارك كسرحلو نخد Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, three questions to both of you. The last one was about networks in Denmark, because are there people like yourselves in Denmark who we can work with to do similar things, because the problem is as much in Denmark as it's in Norway or Sweden. So can you link us to your networks? That was the last question. The question before that was how can we use the Norwegian example? What are the lessons from that for other places, particularly for Denmark, where the problem is similar, well, as much as bad, but the situation seems to be lagging behind. And then the first one question is to use, mostly OSA, which is about the festival in Sweden, when we've heard that there's going to be they're going to be stopped. These festivals seem to be carrying on, and there's going to be one very soon. How is that? How is that possible? What is not working? What seems to be amiss? I think you've answered it. Maybe you can emphasize it a bit more. Shall we start with the network one from both of you? Do you want to start, Osa?
Yeah. I will be happy to share my political contacts in Denmark, of course. I haven't heard about anybody yet lifting the Eritrean issue on political level there. But I'm, of course, happy to share contacts that I have.
Yeah, there have been some media coverage in Denmark too on the issue where I've been consulted. The challenge, is that there are rather few international researchers on Eritrea. There is, I don't know, a dozen or so who kind of produce regular scholarly studies, who know Eritrea from an academic and kind of operational viewpoint. So you have some very credible research institutions in Denmark who do studies on both human rights and international relations and concerns. But as far as I know, none of them have a Eritrea specialist. But I have to go back and check, and I can link you up if there are any. Because that's always a good, there are Ethiopianists, so to say, not Ethiopians, but Ethiopianist researchers in Denmark. But again, that's that's a different cup of tea. But I have to look into it. So because it is always relevant to anchor it in at university or independent research institutions environment when you want to develop that kind of platform. So look around for academics with an interest in Eritrea.
Do you want to answer the next one? Which
is the lessons learned from Norway. Yeah, I did try to summarize somehow, and I think Denmark, Denmark is a peculiar country. They ruled Norway for 400 years too. We don't forget that. Talking about Sweden, who only kept us for 100 years, but they have turned. In Scandinavia, as you know, Denmark have been the most restrictive on immigration for the last number of years, and that's under the Social Democratic Party. I think they are increasingly concerned again, and I think that's the entry point in Denmark with domestic stability. Domestic stability, these kind of tensions, these kind of segregations, these kind of confrontations between diaspora groups or within the same diaspora even, has an impact on society at large in terms of what Scandinavian society is like to present themselves as stable, safe, secure, non-violent, little crime. Sorry, Sweden, you're out of that picture now. And Denmark is very keen to protect that status. So again, to focus on the potential of these networks that the Eritrean regime represents, as Åsa mentioned, it is and some researchers have written on that and characterized it as a mafia state, because it is an economic enterprise. It is not only a political enterprise. Eritrea is an economic enterprise with extracting huge amount of money, which are not accounted for. And we don't know what that money is used for. There are a number of foreign accounts owned by Eritrean generals and political elites. Why do they have hundreds of millions of euros in Switzerland? We don't know. Where do they come from? We don't know. That kind of focus, to put attention to the fact that this is a criminal enterprise and there are criminal networks operating, siphoning unaccounted money, which should be a real concern for both security, police, intelligence, and financial institutions in our countries. And I haven't seen that yet raised to the level which is need to be raised.
Thank you. Also, do you want to
I think actually what you did in Norway to connect it to integration, I think that's something that would work at least in all the Scandinavian countries, because it is a big issue that we see our societies being split by different forces. We have Islamist forces, we have Eritrean regime, and we have the Russians coming in, we have the Iranians. I mean, there's this, and what is uniting them is that they are threatening what you call, Kjetil, our common values, for stand up for democracy and freedom of speech. So I think this is actually a way in. Definitely.
On the issue of the,
Of the
Sweden
festival.
festival.
Yes.
Sorry, before I forget,
Yeah.
sorry for interrupting.
No
If you
problem.
excuse me. Because Denmark has a very active and prominent Danish Center for Human Rights. I think you should go there first of all and and ask them to say you need to study how our human rights are infringed and undermined and breached in Denmark. The Danish state is obligated to protect our rights. The Danish state is failing to do that on a daily basis. So try to activate the Danish Center for Human Rights, for instance, to do a study on that. Sorry.
Yeah, regarding the festival, I understand that it seems confusing from the outside. What we have managed to do is to stop the festival to take place in houses that belongs to the Stockholm city. But they can still be on the ground outside. This will make it more difficult for them. They cannot use the toilets. They don't have seminar rooms. They don't have water. They don't have electricity. So it will make it more complicated and expensive for them. But they can still make the festival because it's the police who gives this right, and they cannot stop it because of the freedom of speech. But it has been, there will be an appeal to court. So, well, if we're lucky, that will stop it. But I think the chances are slim.
May I ask a question also on that issue? Have the Stockholm municipality also denied other cultural festivals from other diasporas?
No, not that I know of.
So let me be the devil's advocate. As a
have-
human rights professor, you are providing a discriminatory practice without a basis in law. So what you're
No.
doing is not right.
No, not at all. What we have in Stockholm is that in the agreement, this is getting on. The houses are owned by Stockholm City, but they are used by a civil society organization. And this civil society organization has to guarantee that the people they rent to are not non-democratic or fostering non-democratic means. So what has happened before, for example, it's not that cultural festivals have been stopped, but for example, speakers from Islamist organizations or speakers threatening people have been forbidden to be there. And that's because we have the democracy criteria.
This is an interesting debate. I will not continue. But I may just add one thing in the sense that it is hard to prove that, and again, I'm not defending these guys, but I'm standing up on some principles that the Eritrea-föreningen in Sweden or Norway, the Eritrean Association, which are the pro-government association, to say that they are organized very differently than the German Foreign Association or the British Association in Norway is very difficult to say because they have the same statutes. It's a civil society-based organization. And some of them have elected bodies, some of them have not. So you can say that, they're not, they don't have to be, the leadership or the structure doesn't have to be democratically elected. And to say that this is their officially registered legal entities in Sweden or Norway, to ban one and not all is discriminatory practices.
Well, I do not agree.
No?
Because
I look forward to the court case. I'm going to be witnessing.
I will send you the democracy criteria by the Stockholm City, but also the new democracy criteria that is proposed to be a national law, which I think will be even better. Where you also,
But it highlights the need for us to understand the subtleties of how these organizations are used by the Eritrean regime, and also the fact that their pre-existing status when we were all fighting for Eritrea and the betterment of the Eritrean people are no longer there. The premise has changed, and it's up to us, Eritreans, to highlight these things, to highlight these changes. For instance, in the UK, we have stopped them from collecting public funds using charity laws. They're not charitable organizations, so they cannot, or they have to justify why they're collecting it. And so it's things like that. Or when they hire premises, if it's not a public meeting, why are they offered public protection? They should pay for their own security and things like that, which makes it impossible for them to do things that they used to do. It doesn't mean it doesn't go on. So there are subtleties, and it's up to us to understand these. Who's speaking? Okay.
They use a very corrupted corporation within the country and not paying tax. We call them what we got, and that they are close. So it's completely this. We shouldn't make it. They shouldn't be allowed.
No, and I think also as mentioned it several times, the follow the money trade is crucial. I 100% agree, because that is the easiest way to actually identify breaches of domestic and international law. Because what they're doing with handling of this money is obviously a breach. So that is the most effective way. And I know that Eritrea Focus in UK is doing studies on that with good results. Yeah.
To summarize and to my friend who asked the question, Tigrinya, ክልቲኦም እቲ ዘለዎም ሊንክስ ኣብ ዴንማርክ ብዙሕ ስጡም ዝኾነ ሊንክስ የለን፣ ግን እቲ ዘለዎም ንኸካፍሉ ተቐሪቦም ኣለዎም ሞ ድሓር መፂኻ ረኸቦም ወይ ቶም ካብ ዴንማርክ መፂኹም ዘለኹም ብሓንሳእ ኮይንኩም ረኸብዎም ኢኹም። ኦሳ ፖለቲካል ሊንክስ ዘለዋ ከተራኽበኩም እዚ ብጣዕሚ ኢምፖርታንት ነገር እዩ። ሸትል ከዓኒ academic links allo. What was that organization? Danish Center for Human Rights. كيدكم سلمتا إخم بزعبة إيرترا زي تقدسوا زلهم زقدات زختت نعولكم نحنا كم Danish Eritreans إلكم كتحطوا تخليهم نزون ما تيخم رخبو. I think these are very important things. تناي Sweden عنتو ينقليس أتونيرا ت buildings تي جزاوتي أبايتي ناي ممحدار نعقول خيط تقامو أتوابيلهم وميوم ت grounds تمريت يوم تقامو زلو قالسيو كنك قالسينا مالتيو كالي انتاي تباهلو نيرو. I think that should do for now.
تي ناي general account financial
أوه تجنزب بمكتتال نعو عوتنا خخون زخيل ገንዘቦም ኣበይ እዩ ዘሎ እንታይ እዮም ዝገብሩ ዘለዉ ስለምንታይ እዩ ክንዲዚ ገንዘብ ኣብ ኢዶም ዘሎ እዚ ኢሹዝ እዚ ናይ ጉዳይ ናይቶም ሃገራት እዩ ጉዳይ ናይ ኖርዌይ እዩ ጉዳይ ናይ ስዊድን እዩ ጉዳይ ናይ ዴንማርክ እዩ ስለዚ እዚታት ሃይላይት ክንገብር እዚ ማፍያ ኦርጋናይዜሽን እዩ ኩላህና ምሽ ከምኡ ኢልና ኢና ንኣምን ዘለና ስለዚ ነዚ ብመርትዖታት ከነቕርቦ ክንክእል ኣለና ነዚ ከነቕርቦ ከለና ከዓኒ ንዓና ከም ኤርትራውያን ጥራሕ ከይኮነ ዝውፅዓና ዘሎ እዚ ጉዳይ እዚ ንስዊድን ውን ንኖርዌይ ውን ንዓዲ እንግሊዝ ውን ንዴንማርክ ውን ፀገም እዩ ምክንያቱ ብዙሕ ኢሊጋል ኣክቲቪቲዝ ይግበር ስለ ዘሎ ሶ ነዚ ሃይላይት ክንገብር እቲ ቃልስና ኸውን ዘለዎ ሓደ ካብቲ ክንቃለሰሉ ዘለና መንገዲ ንዓና ኣብ መንጎና ጥራሕ ክኸውን የብሉን እቲ ዘረባ ነቲ ንነብረሉ ሃገር ከመይ ገይሩ እዩ ዝፀንዎ ዘሎ ከመይ ገይሩ እዩ ጉዳያት ዘባላሹ ዘሎ ኣብ ኢንቴግሬሽን እንታይ ፀገም የምፅእ ኣሎ እቶም ኣብዚ ተወሊዶም ዝዓብዩ ቆልዑት ኣብዚ ሃገር ኮንትሪቢዩተርስ ንኸይኮኑ እንታይ ይግበር ኣሎ YPFDJ ከመይ ገይሩ ይፀልዎ ኣሎ ዝብል ነገር ንኽፅናዕ ክንገብር ክንክእል ኣለና academic institutions political institutions ኩሎም ኢንጌጅ ክንገብሮም ክንክእል ኣለና ዶክተር ጨፈና
ዶክተር ጨፈና ናብዚና እቲ ናይ ዳኒሽ ሴንተር ፎር ሂውማን ራይትስ ዝበለቱ ብክፍሊ ዲፕሎማሲውን ክንረኽቦም ስለንኽእል ዳሃር ንዘራረብ እሞ ብሃባር ንሰርሕ
Right. Thank you.
Okay, let me start by commenting on one. Let me start by commenting on what Salam had said about. Didn't Ellen? All right. All right. You say Shetil is great because he had done his PhD in London, and I would say he's great because the title of his PhD is My Weni, which is a very in-depth study on Eritrean highland. What is it called? Normally, people have started to kind of romanticize, or it has become vogue now to talk about Hekendaba. So your contribution has been great, and I have to commend you on that. And this work itself is quite interesting and is very important and timely. And as a scholar, of course, you've done a lot. And this idea of transnational repression, following the great seminal work of Trish Hefner, has been very interesting subject for a lot of people. It should have been, because Eritrea makes a unique case of a small country violating the sovereignty of great nations and controlling its exiles. So this should not just be an Eritrean problem, but it's a world problem. So it's very important that you highlighted, you took this subject and tackled it. But my comment or my plea would be, how can this be made rather more magnified, so to say, by mobilizing scholars such as yourself to make it rather, to add more perspectives, and to make policymakers really take this seriously. One more thing I would like to maybe also part of my plea is, because you mentioned about the political, the social, and the legal implications. The legal implications should be important for us in mainly in Europe, continental Europe and UK. And how can, or what ways can we really highlight on the legal dimension of it? Because it's a very clear case here of people who claim they have been persecuted by the country at home, and they're here, and then after 6 or 7 years, they go back and visit, while some of us don't. So wouldn't there be some kind of resources that need to go into this checking? Because you talked about integration, how this is, impacting integration. How about the idea of abusing the genuine or the Western generosity of accepting people who really need the help? So that was what I wanted to highlight, and then if that can be considered. And one thing about the translation or the interpretation of the word transnational repression in Tigrinya, myself and my colleague, Dr. Thomas, had debate over that. And then we said the best equivalent would be Sigre Hagarawi instead of the Sigre Dobawi, because Sigre Dobawi would be just moving, crossing border. So I'm just suggesting to my Eritrean compatriots, Sigre Hagarawi instead of Hagarat. I mean, you have borders, that this is moving across borders, not just one border. So yeah, so it's just my suggestion. Somebody was got a PhD in media anyway, so we debated about. And thank you very much. And that is, I think that's what I would.
Thank you very much. ጊዜ ከደና ስለ ዘሎ ባወት ክንውዳይና ዳሃርና ብድራር ክንከድ ክንምለስ ኢና ፕሊዝ ግን ፍቶ ክንሃትት ከለና ጀስት ፍቶ ስፔሲፊክ ዝሆነ ፍቶ ክስታይ ነገር ሕፅር ነብሎ ያ
ታታ ሓቲታ ዘላ ትመለስ እሞ ሽዑናይ መወዳእታ ሕቶ I think okay, ask it.
I'll make it short. Well, first and foremost, you two are a friend of Eritrea, and I don't think we could have done any better. So thank you. The cause of Eritrea is the cause of freedom, a cause of democracy, and a cause of human rights. And thank you for not looking the other way. So my question is regarding public diplomacy. How could we educate the cause of Eritrea to the public? That way, such cause is driven from grassroots to the politicians, to the institutions, and to the decision makers. Thank you.
Okay, so Shetel, would you like to start by answering the first question or responding to Dr. Chafana's question, and then the second one?
Yes, please. First, Doctor, your reflections, thank you for them. And I think the legal implications is, I think, the most concrete. You have two very concrete and robust strategies to try to confront the regime. It's the economic path and it's a legal path, which is, it's not the fuzzy social sciences that I'm doing. Yeah, it's concrete. You can manage to frame it, and I think definitely the legal path should be further explored. You should get this Norwegian report translated, at least that section, which is easy, just to use Google Translate for that matter, to see how it relates to Norwegian law and the breaches of Norwegian law. And I think that's pretty much, standard law in Europe anyway. So you can kind of start working on that, for instance. But it needs to be country specific, obviously, and contextualized, and need to elaborate. And I think that's a very good way to start working more concretely to address the concerns, which either, if the politicians doesn't want to respond to it, the police and the judicial authorities need to take it up more seriously if you can provide that kind of tangible evidence of breach of law. Then the asylum institution you mentioned, as it's a big debate all across Europe, in the sense that the influx of refugees or also labor migrants from African countries are overwhelming our asylum institute. And hence there are, I think every immigration authority in every European country are working to reassess, as we heard in Sweden, also the same is in Norway. They are reassessing a number of Eritrean portfolios who have received asylum in Norway and later citizenship, which are now looked into again because of suspicion of fraud, that they are not rightful claimants of asylum. And obviously that is relating to the regime, pro-regime supporters. I think that is also an avenue you can try to push. It is a bit more difficult, it's a bit more sensitive because it is so polarizing within the Eritrean community. And why should, it can be used in the blame game. So it need to be tactical on that matter. So it was our public diplomacy. That is key, and to get back on the moral high ground, so to say, of the concern of Eritrea is a concern of everyone. I think you can learn, which just when you spoke, I kind of connected it to the case of the most prominent political leader in today and how he has framed his country's concern is Zelensky in Ukraine. He has addressed every parliament in Europe directly, and in every speech to every parliament, it is a very different speech because everything is anchored in that country's national history and politics. I witnessed the speech in the Norwegian parliament he held, and how he exactly went into the Norwegian history of being under a union with Sweden and Denmark. Sorry, don't take it personally. And contextualizing. Ukraine today is like you were 100 years ago. You need to help us because of that. You have the duty to be solidaric to our case because of that. And that kind of anchoring into the national narrative of every state is so important. And Eritrea, you have a lot to take off in that regard. Your 30 years of struggle, your federal period, your undermined by Haile Selassie, your colonial era, everything. You can draw on that and say that, you know, this is not only our history, this is not only our plight. You were there 50 years ago, 100 years ago. You know, you need to relate to us. That kind of contextualizing, which Zelensky is fabulous to do. Of course, he has a team of advisors providing him that information, but you have hundreds of scholars, Eritrean scholars in every country who can provide you that information, and to design country-specific public diplomacy strategies. That's what you're going to do.
Thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, I think if you want the general public to start talking about Eritrea, you need to work, use all the networks that we have in society. You need to make good connections in the media, to find interesting stories that can be told in the media. And you have so many interesting people in the diaspora, so I'm sure it will be easy to find the good stories to tell. Scholars to make good reports on how the transnational repression is hindering integration, or to make other good reports on how Eritrea is cooperating with Russia and threatens national security, but also like connecting to the domestic. You need to work with civil society organizations who can make the reports you want to have written, but have a more, I wouldn't say reliable, but more a sender that people in Sweden or Norway will trust more. Because many people will go like, okay, this Eritrean says so, but this other Eritrean says a completely different thing, and how should I know what's right? And they just step back and say, that's not my business. So you need somebody else to voice your concerns as well. I would go for less demonstrations. I would go for less discussion on Twitter, less talking to the regime, and more talking to the country where you live. Maybe also get involved yourself. Get involved in the political parties of the country, lift your issues in these organizations, get involved in human rights organizations. Not because once you get involved in the organizations of the country, you learn how politics is done and how civil society works in this country, and then you can also be more efficient in advocating your own agenda. So yeah, get involved.
Thank you very much.
And then unfortunately you have to spend maybe a bit less time with fellow Eritreans and more time with other people. And I think that will actually make more people listen to you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, both of you. Unfortunately, my time has come to an end, and these discussions are on. Well, I'm speaking to them in Tigrinya. Okay, so let me conclude in English, and then I'll switch to Tigrinya. So these discussions are ongoing. Thank you for enriching our discussions, and thank you for adding and particularly emphasizing the things that are actually within our reach. We are multinational Eritreans, Swedish Eritreans, Norwegian Eritreans, Britain Eritreans, and so on and so forth, American Eritreans. So it is actually a strength that we've got, and you have given us the tool. Or not the tool, the thinking in terms of making our agenda fit into that, making our presence felt in a positive way and in a not so ignorable way, and that's a challenge for us. And thank you both for that. As I said, we're not going to let you go. This conversation is ongoing. I'll conclude in Tigrinya. ያው ኣብቲ መወዳእታ እቲ መልእኽቲ ዝመፅእ ዘሎ ብዙሕ ስራሕ ከም ዘድልየና እዩ ከም ስዊዲሽ ኤርትራውያን ኣሜሪካን ኤርትራውያን እንግሊዛውያን ኤርትራውያን ነቲ ጉዳይና ኣብቲ ጉዳይ ናይቲ ንነብረሉ ሃገር ከነእትዎ ክንክእል ኣለና ስለዚ እቲ ቃልሲ ሓደ መንገዲ ጥራሕ ኣይኮነን. Also was saying that maybe we should talk to the regime less. Yeah, maybe we should talk to our governments here, our adopted governments here. ስለዚህ ምናልባሽ ናብተን ዘለናለን ሃገራት ክንጥምት ከድልየና እዩ ረኣያና ከነግፍሕ ከድልየና እዩ አፕሮችና እቲ ጠመተናን እቲ ንበጽሓሉ ቦታን ክገፍሓልና መታን ምናልባት ኣብቲ ዴሞንስትሬሽናት ነጥብኦ ግዜን ኤነርጂን እንደገና ኮስት ዝገብረና ዘለዎ ነገር አሪኻ ካሊእ ክግበር ዘለዎ ነገር ከም ዘሎ ናብ ናይ አካደሚክ ትካላት ከነድህብ ከም ዘለና ካልኦት ጉዳይና ምሳና ኮይኖም ክሕዝዎ ክንገብር ከም ዘለና ምክንያቱ ሓደ ኤርትራዊ ዝብል ካሊእ ኤርትራዊ ከዓ ከም ዝብል ስለዚ እንታይ ከም ንገብር ኣይንፈልጥን ኢና ዝብሉ ሰባት ይበዝሑ ስለ ዘለው ናይ ሚድያ ትካላት አዕሩኽቲ ክንገብር ከም ዘለና ናይ አካደሚክ ትካላት አዕሩኽቲ ክንገብር ከም ዘለና ንዓታቶም ከኣኒ ክንብድሆም ከም ዘለና ነቲ ጉዳይ ከጽንዕዎ ምክንያቱ ጉዳይና ጉዳዮም ክኸውን ክንገብር ከም ዘለና እዩ ዝመጽእ ዘሎ እዚ ቀጻሊ ክኸውን እዩ ማለት ሓደ ካብቲ ከም ግሎባል ይኣክል ክንከደሉ ዘለና መንገዲ ክትከድሉ ዘለኩም መንገዲ ክንከደሉ ዘለና መንገዲ ወንሱ እንዳኾነ ይመጽእ ስለ ዘሎ ናብቲ መንእሰያት አበጊሶሞ ዘለው ቃልሲ ኮንትሪቢዩት ንገብሮ ብዙሕ ነገር ኣሎ ስለዚ ናብ እንዳድሃብና ክንከይዲና የቀንዴልና ናብ ድራር ይመስለና አጽል Thank you very much everyone.
Thank you very much, the three of you. It's been very educational and informative session. Thank you very much. We will now have Kabzi Bumqal and Abkusaikin Kaidina Drar Alena and Abhades at his home, Kavar, Index, Drar Gerna. This is Kutzil Meadow, Kutzelina Malet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
It's very challenging to do it in two different switch between languages.
We love you. Professor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, of course.
The issues about Eritrea.
Yeah.
I just want to inform you, probably you know it. But
Yeah, of course.
one of the incomes for the teaching is for the change rate. For the last 3 years,
The exchange rate, yeah.
the change rate has been the same.
Yeah.
It's like one of the strongest currency because they hold the money and you cannot withdraw cash in Eritrea. That is the main source of them. Just mentioning, probably you know it.
Yeah, I heard it as well. That's
you would not believe that currency, the Eritrean currency, NATFA is stronger than we are studying.
It's just fake.
Countries that have a good economy. I'm just mentioning.
Saying thank you.
Mentioning for your knowledge.
Thank you. Thank you.